Welcome back to Screenfish Radio. I am so glad you could join us this week, and we are talking about Don't Look Up, Adam McKay's satirical disaster movie that is now streaming on Netflix. And I am so thrilled. It's been a while, but I'm so glad to have the dream team back together on the podcast. Jolie, Featherstone, and Julie Levac. Welcome back, ladies.
Yay, thank you.
Thank you. This is so much fun to be back together. Virtually, of course.
Best.
That's right. Well, virtually, yes. We're still not in the same room, but that's okay.
We got in the same room together once this year, so that's good.
Yeah.
We did. That was great. Yeah, that was. But when one day when we could eat in restaurants, that one week
we were done.
That's right. We got it in the window. But no, I'm very excited to chat with you both. I'm so glad that we could do this. And Don't Look Up is directed by Adam McKay and stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, Ariana Grande, Timothy Chalamet, Kate Blanchett, Meryl Streep, and many more. And it tells the story of two low-level astronomers who must go on a giant media tour to warn mankind of an approaching comet that will destroy planet Earth and all life upon it. The film has been in theaters, but is currently streaming on Netflix. And as always, a reminder that this podcast is rated S for spoilers. But ladies, I would love to know what you think of Don't Look Up.
I loved it. I had pretty high hopes. The cast is incredible. I mean, you come to know that Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, Meryl Streep, Jonah Hill, it looked really good. I think that the trailer looked really good. Loved the cast, and it looked hilarious, really, and it was hilarious. It's a satire piece, and if you know that going into it, I think that you'll be a little bit more comfortable with the content. But it's got really not great reviews, I guess, sort of mixed reviews. Do you know what I mean? And I guess if you don't know that it's a satire, you could think that it's a little much, and I get that. And I think that it also has a pretty specific group of people that it's kind of making fun of. So if somebody is kind of within that group, maybe they wouldn't like it. Fair enough. But all in all, I thought it was amazing. It was hilarious, scary, relevant, and also kind of heartwarming, and it really made me think. And so it was strange how it encompassed all of those things for me, but awesome.
I also really enjoyed it. I kind of went into it trying to know as little as possible. I kind of knew the bare bones concept of it. I don't think I'd seen the trailer. I'd kind of avoided reviews, although I had heard that there were some mixed reviews, some great and some not so great. But this was actually the film that the first film that Sean and I watched of 2022. So if you have the mentality that the film you start the year with is how your year is going to go, slightly terrifying. But I think it's already talking about and comparing things that we're kind of dealing with already. As you said, Jules, it's extremely topical. It's very, very relevant. And I think it is something that is quite kind of unique to North American audiences. Like, I think if you have lived in North America or have paid really close attention to North American, specifically US politics over the past 4-5 years, you'll appreciate the satire so much more, and you'll kind of pick up on little nuggets of wisdom or nuggets of satire in the film. I personally enjoyed it. One thing that is really I like to note about this film is that it's one of the few films that I've seen in recent weeks that truly from beginning to end I was 100% dialed in. Even though that it is a long movie, and I do feel it could have benefit from some cutting here and there, but regardless, I really was dialed in from beginning to end, and it kept me engaged the entire time, which I think is quite a feat to do, especially in the days of this pandemic.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I put it on at 11 o'clock, not realizing how long it was.
Oh,
We watched it really late too.
I, I regretted it. But I wanted to finish it like that. I expected I'd watch it for an hour and pick it up later on in the next day or what have you. But I stuck it out because I really thought that the writing was good on it. Um, Adam McKay has a unique voice. Um, I think when you look at some of his other work, like no, it's not Get Shorty, The Big Short,
yes.
Yeah.
is one of his as well. And I know that I remember being surprised at the tone of The Big Short. Like I didn't expect it to have so much energy to it.
Right.
And I felt that about this. I will say this: I actually didn't love the casting as much as I thought I would, and it's not because I thought they were bad. In some ways, I see it as a compliment to the film because I thought the writing was good enough. It didn't need Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence running point on it. And I mean, I know DiCaprio signed on when they said it's Dr. Strangelove for climate change. That's what made him want to sign on, which I could see. But I remember as I was watching it, I thought I enjoyed the writing enough that I would have liked it if it was someone else that wasn't DiCaprio level of A-list. And I to me, I don't know if that's I'm not really criticizing him because I didn't think he did a bad job at all. I thought the writing was better than some of the performances. I think Meryl was the best part of the movie personally. I thought her performance was great.
She was
I
a
mean,
scene stealer for sure.
it was. I don't know. I didn't dislike Meryl Streep at all in this film. I thought it was good, but maybe I just didn't. Maybe I just disliked the character, and I think that that's the point.
Yeah.
That I'm just sort of like, ew, really cringeworthy. You know what I mean? And that is the point. I loved the casting, but I really liked Leonardo DiCaprio in this role, and it is very fitting because he is a huge climate change
Yeah.
advocate. He does a lot of environmental work. Um, Jennifer Lawrence was good. I think it was a very Jennifer Lawrence role. Do you know what I mean? Um, Loved Jonah Hill in that role. I think it was hilarious. Very Jonah Hill. And then I don't know, Timothy Chalamet. Yeah, he was fine. Meryl Streep. Yeah, she was fine. I wasn't like blown away, but I can see what you mean. If it were less kind of star-studded, I think it would still be pretty successful.
Yeah, I think it gets the attention because of the stars.
Absolutely.
And I think, I mean, it's absolutely destroyed Netflix in terms of viewership. Like it's for all the mixed reviews, and I think I saw it was 55% on Rotten Tomatoes, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But for all its mixed reviews, it absolutely killed in the ratings for Netflix streaming. And I think that has a lot to do with the star power that was attached. And I think the star power was necessary because of the message they wanted to get to. You had to have as much attention for it
Yeah.
as possible. I think that's why so many people signed on. I loved Meryl because it was such an anti-Meryl role. Like it's been a long time since I've seen her play such a great bad guy.
It's funny that we're talking about casting because it is such like an A-lister cast. I myself, when it comes to Leo DiCaprio, I have a hard time watching him in movies because I feel like I'm watching Leo DiCaprio. I don't see the character. And I think that's something, yeah, just with him, it's one of those things. And yet in this film is the first time in a while that I've seen him in something and I actually felt I was watching the character and not Leonardo DiCaprio playing this character. Like I truly felt this was the first time in a while I've seen him and didn't see his persona first and foremost, which is kudos to him for that. I thought it was a really good performance. like you said, I really liked Meryl in this role, this sort of gender flipped Trump-esque president. I again, like I kind of went into the film knowing very little, so that was a surprise to me. I didn't know that she was going to be in that role, and I remember I kind of gasped when I saw her. I was like, oh my gosh. And yeah, I thought she was quite a scene stealer. I thought she did a really good job playing this really
Yeah.
terrible person.
Oh yeah. Oh, she's awful. She's awful. Oh man. What the two of you, do you have a love of satire? Like, is there a satire that in particular that you get excited about, or was this sort of a new one for you?
I don't think I'm largely into satire, to be honest with you. And I actually, the very first piece that I ever wrote for Screenfish was a satire. I think it's called War Machines. It was a Netflix
Oh yeah,
movie.
that's right. Yeah.
Was it Brad Pitt?
Brad Pitt.
Think, yeah. And I didn't love it. And it was hard for me to judge it because I don't have a big satire library under my belt. Do you know what I mean? But it just didn't click for me. This one, I thought it was perfect. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm a fan of satire. I think that I hear what you're saying, Jules. I think for me with satire, and I think this is the case for everyone, I think that you connect with it more when it's when the satire in question is exploring a topic or a landscape that you're really familiar with. And I think that for all, especially the three of us, you know, we're online, we pay attention to the news, we pay attention to current affairs and things like that. We're North American, we're neighbors to the US. We're obviously aware of climate change and things that are, you know, really topical subjects. So I think for us, this satire is something that we can really connect with. It's very tangible for us in a way. Whereas sometimes, you know, if it was a topic that I didn't have any closeness to or any kind of knowledge of, it's harder because satire, I think, it becomes so much more rich when you do have a closeness or an understanding of the topic that's being explored. So I really enjoyed this one. I do enjoy satire, but I did really enjoy this one because it is something that I think we all are so close to, and it has been so close to us for a while.
Yeah, there are a few over the years that I've really liked. I find that, you know, there's satires and there's spoofs,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
they are different. They're quite different. You know, like a spoof, I find one like you know, Naked Gun, like the Leslie Nielsen type movies, or the, you know, scary movies, Hot Shots, and back in the day, like those were movies that were making fun of other movies. They weren't really trying to get to any particular point. And I think that's the point of satire, is it's got to get to get to somewhere. But I mean, of course, Dr. Strangelove is one. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's a classic. All about the nuclear threat from, I think it's 1954. I might be wrong on the year. Wag the Dog is another good one, with De Niro. I think that's De Niro and Dustin Hoffman. It's a satire of the Hollywood industry, and this is way off in some ways in another direction. But reading in university, reading A Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift, where he talks about how eating babies is the way to solve the economic problems. And you're reading it, and as you're reading this thing, and it seems like he's making a lot of sense, and then all of a sudden he says, and then you eat the children, and you go, wait, and you're like, what am I missing? And I like that about this one, is that, you know, this felt like a very, you know, in terms of a massive, you know, scenario, and I'm not talking about how realistic the scenario is, but the response felt very realistic, and yet also so wrong at the same time. And that's what I loved about this. I thought the writing was quite sharp, down to their use of social media, down to the politicization of the issue, all of these things.
I thought just made it was just well written. It would have been nice if it was a little shorter, but I started at 11 o'clock, so that's on me.
Yeah, there were many layers to this, and it's not just about climate change, but it's also about politics, and it's about how society is completely distracted by their own little bubble, but not just their bubble, the entertainment industry. And that's literally what took priority. Not we're all going to die, but, you know, Ariana Grande and Kid Cudi just got engaged. So that's way more newsworthy.
I think you're right. And I love the idea of distraction in this film that you just mentioned there, because I do think that as much as it's definitely a film about climate change. It absolutely is. But it's also not. Like, I feel like you could take that issue and sub in a number of other ones, even the pandemic,
Mhm.
and see this type of film work. But I was wondering from you, do you think we do live in a culture of distraction? And if so, what do we do?
Sorry.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a huge, massive question. And being in my line of work, I would absolutely say we live in a culture of distraction. And unfortunately, we have corporations that have a lot of culpability behind it, in my opinion. And they do kind of talk about that or explore that a bit in the film with Mark Rylance's character, where we live in an age where we have these massive platforms that exist solely to sell space and time to advertisers. To do so, they need people to have eyeballs on the platform, be interacting within the platform. So, of course, unfortunately, when the structure is set in such a way that we're purely going off those metrics, um, you know, activities and content and interactions that generate more eyeballs and generate more buzz is what gets kind of promoted, and that's kind of what takes precedence. Um, and these platforms are built in such a way. It's like how when they talk about the psychology of casinos, keeping you energized and constantly stimulated to keep playing, to keep feeding money into the casinos. Social media networks and apps are designed in much the same way to keep your eyeballs interested, keep your brain interested, stimulated, so that you'll spend more time there. So I think these things are absolutely constructed in this way, which can be very distracting for us. I find them very distracting, and I work in the industry, unfortunately. So I think when it comes to how do we work with this, or how do we get some semblance of balance back, I feel that you know the cards are kind of stacked against us, but I do feel that there are small things that we can do personally, and I also think there's more policies that governments can put into place to kind of rein some of these corporations in a bit. But from an individual kind of personal level, just taking time to have screen free time or app free time, however you need to, whatever works for you, to kind of make sure that you get away from screens for a bit and focus on other activities. It can be really, really helpful. And it just also helps kind of set a reset button as well, I find. So I think that's kind of just a small thing that we could all personally do if we feel that we are getting really distracted by some of these things. But yeah, no, it's a huge question, and it's a really good one.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of put my thoughts into words on this one, but just everything that you said, but also I just can't stop thinking about the news anchors and how, it's not just kind of the people who are consuming it, but it's also the people who are creating it. Um, how they even being faced with this reality, they couldn't snap out of it. They were still, you know, they had their news anchor face on, and they were cracking their jokes and kind of and playing off of each other, and it was very awkward to watch how They didn't take it seriously, and they kind of danced around it. uh it was all very strange. And then even I don't remember his name, but the big tech guy, the
Oh
Elon
yeah,
Musk of the film, if you will.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Mark Rylance's character.
Right. I can't remember his character's name. um he's creating more and more technology that is going to continuously consume your life, that you can't function without it. Do you know what I mean? Or at least that's sort of what he's setting out to do. um and that's kind of another thing that really interested me, not just the sort of distraction aspect of the technology, but feeling that it's that you can't, perform without it.
Mhm.
All of your little daily activities are completely, um how do I describe it? I don't know. You can't live without it. Do you know what I mean? Very
Yeah,
Well,
strange.
becoming so dependent on it. Like you said,
Yeah.
it's like our activities become. Not that I say I agree with this, but there's the sense of, I think they kind of touch upon it in the film about activities or opinions not having meaning until they've been broadcast. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And I think that that definitely plays a part in it. I like how you brought up that scene too, when they go on that talk show and they're like, "This is happening. Like this is a crisis," and
Yeah.
they're kind of joking, riffing along, and when they kind of freak out on them, being like, "Why are you taking it seriously?" They're like, "Oh, we have to have chemistry. Like we kind of keep it light on the show. We have to,
Yeah.
keep it light for our viewers." It's like, oh, maybe there are some things we should take seriously.
Oh my gosh.
But I thought that from like the kind of news and entertainment angle, how they show that in the film, I thought was really interesting too.
One of my favorite lines in the whole film is Kate Blanchett, who I also love Kate Blanchett in this movie actually as well. And after Leo goes off at the end of the film, goes off on TV, and she just goes, "Why'd you do that? I mean, I really liked you. Why'd you gotta do that?" And I was like, that's it. That's it. They talk about, well, you're not tracking well, right? And Jennifer Lawrence gets booted. I did think it was very interesting. And again, there were so many little threads of commentary throughout this film that's what I appreciated. Like the fact that the strong female character and the African American scientist are pushed aside for the sake of the handsome one,
Yeah.
white male. And I was like, and then he loses it, and she's just like, ah, I mean, there you go. Now what? Come on. And it was such a great moment. And I think you're absolutely, I understand the idea of wanting to get the message out a certain way, but there was such an urgency to this.
Mhm.
And yet, oh, and I love this too. They're taught, right, they finally get the message out, and one of the questions comes up on the screen is, will there be a Super Bowl? And it's like, and the funny thing is, I saw that and I went, that's like one of the most realistic parts of this movie,
Mhm.
because that would be like the key question for so many
It's
people.
like the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Is there going to be a Super Bowl? Are we going to be able to go to the Justin Bieber concert, etc., etc., etc.? Yeah, when it came to Leonardo DiCaprio's character, they marketed him.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like they took him as yeah, he's better for the camera than Jennifer Lawrence was, and they marketed him, the hot scientist or whatever. He looks good on TV, he's calm, he can sort of explain it to the people, so to speak, and he becomes this like celebrity almost. You know what I mean? Very strange, but that would happen, and it does happen. It's
Yeah.
wild. And yeah, I mean, I think I said it, you said it, the different layers of this film, it's unbelievable. And they're all relevant. It's the social media, the global warming, uh, regular media. I mean, I could go on. It's terrifying.
Yeah, I think, it's funny, we talk about it being a living in a culture of distraction.
Mhm.
And whether it's social media, whether it's our phones, and I'm certainly guilty of it. Also, the politicization of the issue to try, nature of agendas and all these things to serve certain things, and just be like, just ignore it. The don't look up movement versus the just look up movement towards the end of the film, which was extremely on the nose.
Yeah.
But and then it ends with a family dinner. And I thought, man, I loved that, because even in the midst of, like Leo, you make a point saying Leo gets marketed, and he does. And I think, and he believes his own hype. That's how he ends up with Cate Blanchett.
Yep.
And I thought, and then it ends with him, with Jennifer Lawrence and Chalamet proposing for, which is interesting on two levels, because first of all, you're all going to die. Second of all, there's still some significance to that, even though you're all going to die. Like that's still something that's, meanwhile, you've got the news anchors are like, well, what do you want to do? Do you just want to have sex? Or, do you want to drink? What do you want to do? I just want to sit here and complain about people, and it's like, but you see all these people, different people trying to deal with it. And DiCaprio realizes what he's got to do is be with his family. And it's a very, it's even, it's an intimate moment in some ways. They're all the scientist team is sitting there. They're sharing in the meal. They say grace, which was fascinating to me, and I think that what's one of them says, man, you got your church game. You got some serious church game or something like that.
Oh yeah, Timothy Chalamet.
Chalamet says grace, and it's a beautiful.
Religious.
Well, he says, she asks him if he believes in God, and he says, yeah, my parents raised me to, even though I effing hate them. And he says, and I'd appreciate it if you don't tell anyone though. Just don't let anyone know that's the case.
But I just thought, because it's a personal thing, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't always have to be broadcast to the world what's in your heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. I thought that whole scene was so beautiful, kind of taking away the distractions and returning to what they felt was truly valuable to them, and it was community and family, and being together. I love that it wasn't just kind of Leonardo DiCaprio's like immediate family. I love that his best friend and colleague from work is there with, her new fiance, Timothy Chalamet. And I think it's Dr. Oglethorpe, the scientist. I love that they've found this kind of community together and choose to spend that time together. I don't know if either of you have seen this film or are a fan of this film, but I am a huge fan of Don McKellar's film Last Night. And I was thinking that I love that movie. And I was thinking so much about that during that final scene. And I feel like Last Night is different. It's not quite a satire per se, but it's a very Canadian look at how people might react at the end of the world. And I loved how in that movie it showed so many different things, like people who are choosing to, have a quiet night in with family, spend their last night with their family. Some people are out in Nathan Phillips Square partying, having a whole rave. And then the main character kind of doesn't really know what to do with himself. And he's sort of looking for answers, looking for direction as to how to spend this time. So I was thinking a lot about Last Night at the end of this film. But I really love that notion of they were able to kind of just pay attention to their values, what they deeply valued. What do I want to spend this time doing? And it was being with their community. I thought that was really, really a nice way to end the film, even though it ends with the world being destroyed and all the political donors getting to go off the earth and survive.
That's okay. Meryl Streep gets eaten by a Bakatantu or whatever it is. I forget what I love that line. You die when you're eaten by a Bakatantu or whatever it is. She's like, what's that? She goes, oh, we have no idea.
'Cause we don't know yet.
And then we don't know yet. And she dies at the end and goes, I believe it's called.
Yeah, I really, really appreciated the final. Oh gosh, I'm gonna call it the Last Supper. I just have to. I'm sorry.
No, you can't. That's a
Um,
great, it's what it was.
yeah, it was beautiful. It was awkward, but beautiful. And I agree. I love that it wasn't just the immediate family. They invited community. Um, and they tried to make it special. Do you know what I mean? And there was a moment where I'm like, oh, they're just pretending, they're pretending like this isn't happening. When the walls start to shake and things start to happen, they're continuing to just have normal conversation. But then again, what else would you do? Do you know what I mean? Do you want your final moments to be terrified and scouring, or holding hands with your loved ones and just being in that moment? Do you know what I mean? So that was beautiful. I'm very glad that they chose to destroy the world. And that sounds really bad. But what I mean by that is I'm glad that there wasn't some magical solution. They wake up and it was all a dream, and
Yeah.
the big tech guys, rockets or whatever, actually saved the universe. No, this is a much bigger problem. And I'm glad that it felt more realistic that way. And I think it was more thought provoking that way. And so when it was over, I was like, oh, like this is heart wrenching, and I need to kind of sit down and think about this. But then that last scene happened after the credits, and I don't know, it kind of like it almost ruined it for me because it was just so cheesy and weird. But I didn't let it. I was like, okay.
Which one, Meryl or Jonah?
Yeah, when they
Oh.
they were all cryogenically frozen, and then they were in another planet with dinosaurs, and it was very Adam and Eve, like Garden of Eden vibes, but then there were dinosaurs and Meryl Streep got eaten. It was very weird.
What's so interesting about that scene, because yeah, it's the tonally it's such a departure from how we end the film with this very very sort of peaceful and kind of accepting of the end of the world sort of feeling, and then you go to this kind of back to like the very hard hitting in your face satire of them going to another world. I think what I find interesting about that is kind of the juxtaposition of like what I don't even know how I would describe it, but sort of like what is fulfilling or morally right or valuable to you versus just surviving. Like these people survive, but in a way they kind of are so morally bankrupt. Like you're surviving not with your family or your loved ones. You're now spending the rest of your life with these political donors who were just able to get onto the ship because of their financial privilege. Maybe they don't have any kind of moral drive to be there for each other and have a good community. They're just kind of there because they could and they could survive, as opposed to accepting that you're all going to die and you only have one last night together, but at least you're amongst people that care about you and that you care about, and you're able to have like that accepting, peaceful time together. I found that so interesting. But yeah, it was very different. You have a very different tone when you go from that end scene to them on the other planet, and then Jonah's scene at the end.
Well, it's kind of funny because I mean, I felt the same way. Like it's kind of two jarring scenes, but in some ways, I felt like they ended up worse off
Yes.
than the people who were killed. I mean, Jonah's left streaming or with a live stream that nobody else is ever going to watch. And Meryl is recolonizing a planet that she's never going to lead. And everything, pun intended, is stripped away. Like the tech is gone. You are literally on a planet of trees and mushrooms. And with no clothes, what are you going to do? And killer birds. But it is an interesting, like, again, Dr. Strangelove. Have you seen that one? Have either of you seen You've seen it? Julie has not. Jolie, have you?
I've only seen excerpts of it in film school.
Okay.
I've never actually, it's like a big core problem of mine that I've never seen it beginning to end. I've seen it like chopped up and rearranged in film school.
Oh, there's no judgment here. We could do a whole podcast on movies I haven't seen that I should have. But so Doctor Strangelove is a very similar type of film, and it's all about the nuclear threat, and it ends most famously with a man riding a nuclear bomb like a cowboy down as the entire world is blowing up. And I think there's a song playing over the background, "We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when," and you just see these nuclear bombs going off in the process, and it just ends on that, just leaves it. There's no follow-up scene. This is a very different type of film in some ways. I don't think it needed those last two scenes, but I think because they sort of let those question marks of the villains of all people, they wanted to make sure that the villains got their comeuppance, if you will, on this one.
You know what? I thought it was interesting that Leonardo DiCaprio's character was offered a spot on the ship, and he declined. And I think that's the difference between them and him, where they, it was about escaping and being better and, restarting life and, obviously not dying. Whereas I think Leonardo DiCaprio realized that what is life then without this? So I thought that was very interesting. And then talk about distraction. Meryl Streep leaves behind her own son, right? Forgets him.
She forgets in a true Home Alone moment.
Yeah, there you go.
Kevin, that'll be Home Alone 7.
Home Alone.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
All
it
that
just
was left was his
like,
Birkin.
Yeah, like how morally bankrupt they are, like they're so, they just are so, I guess, far from their, like from their values, or their values have just become, money and power and technology, that, it like you say, it's like they get to survive, but is that better?
Yeah.
Survive in quotations. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's interesting because this was another quote in the film I really liked, was Jennifer Lawrence is talking with Chalamet and his running crew, and she says they're slamming the powers that be and all this stuff, and she says they're not even smart enough to be as evil as you give them credit to be. I was wondering what you thought of that, because I thought that was a really interesting line.
Yeah, and if you think about people in power, I mean, ideally, they are well educated and unbiased and fair. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. And I thought in this situation, they are very one-track minded. Nothing matters other than money and power. And I mean, Jonah Hill spoke about, I'm trying to remember the quote, but he's basically like, there's them and then there's us, but then there's like us up here and we're better than you down there. I mean, it was, very interesting. And that's the thing, they just didn't seem to get it, even though they were presented with all of this information, science, and the 99.999% chance, they still were like, oh, so there's a chance this isn't going to happen. Just totally in denial and distracted by all of the other things going on. And it was, very awkward.
Yeah, I think I liked that line. I thought it was very, very topical to what we're seeing now, with the conspiracy theorists, pointing fingers, saying, oh, well, this person is actually doing this behind the scenes, and they're controlling this and that. And it's like, to be honest, like most people are not as remarkable as you might give them credit for, negatively or positively. You know, like these people are just going, I think there's a lot to be said about apathy and kind of going the path of least resistance. So much of the film was kind of criticizing our apathy, I think, as being humans, and certainly being North Americans, like this apathy towards, you know, crisis. If it's not going to happen right now, oh, we got a couple months, we can deal with that, we'll still have the Super Bowl, you know. Like there's like this extreme apathy, which I think is really reinforced by our culture of distraction and our culture of instant gratification. But yeah, I thought that line was very topical, because you see that play out all the time now, unfortunately, on social media quite a lot, where people are making all sorts of theories and accusations about people, all sorts of people in power doing all sorts of things. And quite honestly, it's usually the simplest path. You know what I mean? It's usually not the path that takes like 10 stops. It's the simplest path is the answer to why someone does something, or why a politician chose to do something. That's kind of how I took that. I thought it was really kind of talking about our current times.
Yeah, I love the line, because I think we have a tendency to demonize the other.
Mhm.
It's like, and I'm not trying to say that everyone is right. Like that guy says, you know, why can't we all just get along? Or I'm not trying to say that, but we demonize them to the levels of almost maniacal, you know, what's the word, Machiavellian, you know, plotting. And I think we just oftentimes struggle to humble ourselves in front of things that we don't understand, or things that don't, like, or our priorities are screwed up, you know, like Rylance's character says, you know, talks about him, or Leo talks about him being a businessman, and he says, business, this is the evolution of the human species. Like, in his mind, I don't think he's sitting there saying this is about me. I think he's not consciously, he thinks he's doing the right thing for the humankind.
Mhm.
It's misguided,
Mhm.
and you know, self-protective, and you know, all of the accusations you can make, but I don't think it's maniacal in the sense of, you know, I don't care about anyone but me, you know,
Mhm.
consciously.
Mm.
You know, I obviously you got to be careful with that. I'm not trying to say that this is the case with everything. That's not what I'm saying. You know, they have Mission American Savior, which is its own sort of, you know, that's the name of the mission, right? America's going to save the world. And again, I think so many things that people say are just they're not about them being evil. It's about them being either prideful or ignorant.
Mhm.
And going back to that last dinner, one of the things, Chalamet in his grace says, we ask you for your grace tonight despite our pride.
Mhm. I loved that line so much.
It was a stunning line, wasn't it? It was just like, whoa.
I
Because
loved I loved his whole grace, because I thought it was so self-aware, and I thought it was very humble. I loved it. I would love to know who wrote it, because I'm like, I really liked it. I was just so self-aware and so humble. But yeah, I completely hear you. I like that notion of how they touch upon that in the end, with talking about, you know, pride and sort of delusions of grandeur. You know, these decisions are being made that are not for the greater good, not because the person in charge is kind of like, I'm going to do this, and it's not for the greater good. Just maniacally want to do this for no other reason. But oftentimes it's that, no, they think it is the right thing to do, but they may not be as aware, or they may not be humble enough to approach it, or like to kind of critique themselves, or re-examine their approach. Yeah, I totally agree with that idea.
self-aware. That was great. That was the word that I was trying to think of. That's it. I think that's it. And man, I see. So, and I thought that was a pretty interesting point. Like so many people that I chat with, they're really willing, as we often are. I can do it too. Point the fingers, you idiot. Um, but there's so much of it is just lack of self-awareness. I love that.
And you know what? I thought it was very interesting how Timothy Chalamet's character, kind of like the teenage punk in the back alley who you automatically judge in a certain way, turns out to be the most kind of self-aware, well-spoken, kind of emotionally mature individual in comparison to the leader of the free world, who is completely not self-aware, one-track minded, etc., etc. So it was fascinating. And then there was that, the discussion or the speech that Jonah Hill was making about sort of the different classes and how we're better than you, and we know it, and he has no shame in saying it. And yeah, seeing sort of the leader versus, what some could portray as the opposite. I just thought it was very interesting, and I liked seeing that he didn't turn out to just be some punk on the street. He
Something
had
Jules,
feeling.
yeah, totally. Something you said just really reminded me how there's such a kind of like foil or like a reflection between the two that I totally forgot that Jonah Hill says his own grace before they launch the machines, and everyone's great people, which is great, but like, what about all the cool things, like cool apartments and like phones? Like, I let's pray for them. Like, that would be sad if we lose those. And it's like, you have this is the son and advisor to the president saying this, and then like you said, you have like this kid who's just kind of like this sort of latchkey skateboarder kid that doesn't seem like he's got a lot going on for himself. He turns out to be so much more self-aware and like humble. But then it's such a kind of interesting foil between the two graces that these young men say.
That's funny. I didn't even think about that.
I forgot about that moment. That moment was so great.
All the cool things, cool apartments. I remember Sean and I were just
so
like,
funny.
oh my God.
Excuse me. Oh, that was, yes. Oh, it's so good. I like stuff, and I don't want to lose that.
I mean, fair enough, but you're not prioritizing here. Sorry.
Yeah. Priorities, people, priorities.
See, that's why I thought the film was about so much more. I don't want to take away from the message of climate change, and I'm not taking away from the severity and the seriousness of an issue like climate change, which, yes, deserves to have people screaming, this is a serious issue. I'm not taking anything away from that. However, what I am saying is that there are any number of issues that could have been slotted in to this structure, whether it's the pandemic, any major election issue that happened in the past few years that was made politicized. And I feel like that's why I think this film was so good, is I feel like it highlighted not just the seriousness of that issue, but it highlighted the seriousness of our response. And to me, that was almost as great a threat, because, and maybe it's because we live in a world where everybody's trying to yell, the sky is falling, no pun intended, literally, for something. So we just want to tune it out and just go la 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 la. I've had enough. Because there are so many things that sometimes it feels like the world is going to burn, just because it's just exhausting. But I thought a film like this highlighted the greater issue of us just not being able to handle it, and us just wanting to stay in our lane and not be willing to humble ourselves and change and say, what can we do?
That's interesting. I didn't even think about this aspect. We're talking about how distracted everybody is and not paying attention to the real issues. And then I think about myself and I guess that's why this film is so relevant, because in real life, there are layers upon layers of crises that we are experiencing and hearing about every single day. So I'm glad that they incorporated multiple things into this film. I think they did it really well. But it is a lot, sometimes far too much to swallow. And so I find myself turning off the news a lot more, because I just can't. It's hard to function if all you're hearing is death and destruction. Uh, and so there has to be some sort of, I guess there has to be some sort of balance between being well informed and well educated and doing your part to mitigate the damages, while also being a human being and enjoying your life and being present in the moment, not distracted on your phone or this or that. So yeah, this is a very overwhelming piece of art, and it's kind of overwhelming to figure out sort of what that means to me, to you, how you would incorporate the things that you kind of heard in this piece into your life. So I guess it's just one of those things that you have to marinate in and figure out how that sort of affects you.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Jules. Like thinking about how distraction comes into play. And sometimes I think we use like distraction as a way to self-soothe, because there is so much going on in our daily lives and also in the world at large. There's so many tragic things and terrifying things happening at all times. And I think there again, like it's kind of like that double-edged sword where nowadays with social media and apps and the 24-hour news cycle, we can stay informed, but also it can be overwhelming. Like the human brain isn't really evolved to receive so much information every minute of the day. It's quite overwhelming. Therefore, we need to self-soothe, and yet we go to those same things, whether it be social media apps, TV, or what have you, to self-soothe. So it becomes like this very strange cycle where, we end up maybe distracting ourselves and not being present. And I think ultimately there's like, I think that there is a bit of an apathy to it, like underneath it, maybe caused by being so overwhelmed, being so overwhelmed by all this information and kind of needing to kind of say, okay, I'm like, consciously or not, I think it's very subconscious that we are kind of like, I need to take a step back because this is really overwhelming, which can, it's needed sometimes, but it can lead to apathy. It can lead to us saying, I don't want to deal with this. This is too scary to wrap my head around. So I'm just going to not think about it and try to go about my day. But yeah, it really is like a double-edged sword, unfortunately. I think that if we can, I really do think that there needs to be a huge culture shift away from this, constant productivity, constant, output, constant communication. Like I think that we need to take a step back and reduce some of that to get into a more balanced place where we don't need to self-soothe all the time. We don't need to distract ourselves all the time because we're constantly overwhelmed.
Yeah. And when you have so many different voices screaming the same thing or screaming different things, it's hard to know who to trust. So somebody can say like, and I, again, I don't want to take away from the severity of the argument here. And I do fully agree with climate change and believe in it and the severity of it. But you do hear scientists from both sides. Some are saying this is serious. Some are saying this is not. With the pandemic, some are saying this is serious. Some are saying this is not. And your Google streaming is just sends you the stuff that reinforces your position. Oh, this tracks with something you watched before. You'll like this. Well, wait a second. No. I need balanced information.
Mhm.
I need balanced information. And it's overwhelming. It's exhausting. I agree 100%. So sometimes it is hard to know who to listen to.
Mhm.
And when I think about this film and I think of, the Tyler Perry and Kate Blanchett, and they're like, oh, don't yell, we like to keep, I think she says, we like to keep the bad news light. It makes the medicine go down.
Mhm.
Because we don't need another person screaming. Okay. Don't tell us just how it is. Tell us in a way we like to hear. Be
Mhm.
nice about it. I think part of that is just because we're overwhelmed and we can't handle it anymore. But I think that we need to humble ourselves and be willing to take a hard look at what's true and respond for whatever the issue is.
Mhm.
Not just what we've always known, but what is actually the case.
It's kind of the scary reality right now, is because um, it is hard to know what to believe, and you're fed all of this information, and you need to be well informed, and you need to sort of use your own brain and um, make your own decisions. But at the same time, it's like, that's some people take it to the nth degree, and that's when conspiracy theories and things like that start to happen. So it's strange, I can say as much as I want, make your own decisions, and this and that, but some people make decisions to do very reckless things, and so it's kind of hard to even know how to approach this subject. I think in Canada, up until now, we've kind of been pretty lucky in terms of news and information, because typically most stations are quite unbiased. They kind of just give the facts. But recently, I've been finding certain news stations, how in the States, if you're more conservative, maybe you're going to watch Fox News. If you're more liberal, maybe you're a CNN kind of folk, because they're quite different. In Canada, typically it's all the same. Until recently, I don't know if you guys, what channels you watch or whatever, people are getting very opinionated on the news recently, which is very strange here. I don't know if it's just kind of one station or not, but certain, and I get that this is a
No.
very polar opposite kind of society we live in nowadays, but I just kind of want the information.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. And it feels different for what we've had. It's not that everything's got a bias, but it's been more prominent. I think there's always been some papers that take one position. I like this guy, some guys don't. But lately, the last couple of years especially, again, it's exhausting. It's emotionally draining. So in some ways, I don't blame the people of this film for just, wanting to tune out and find, I mean, let's face it, Ariana Grande's relationships are fascinating. So let's good for her and Kid Cudi. I mean, I didn't think they were going to make it, but you know what? There you go.
It's funny how in real life people are very obsessed with her relationships, and then they brought that into the movie as well. As hilarious.
Oh my gosh, the Pete Davidson thing.
Exactly.
Oh, that was scary. He was getting death threats because he was dating her. Like it was.
And now he's with a Kardashian. He just made it worse on himself. It's not going to get any better.
And
good for him, though.
But good for him. But good for you, Pete. We wish you the best.
Right? Like, now I'm demonstrating how much that we know about these people's lives to be watching at social media and all the time. Kanye West just threatened Pete Davidson in one of his songs. So
yeah,
yeah,
here we go.
There's about 4 children involved in between these two guys. So.
Well, the sky is falling, a meteor is going to destroy us, and we care about where Kanye moves in.
Yeah, exactly. I think he lives in Wyoming these days.
No, he moved in. I thought he moved in next door.
He bought a house across
next door.
Why do I know this?
This is
I
super
know.
disturbing that we're all talking about this now.
I know.
It's so
We're proving our own
perfect.
point.
We're proving the point of the film. The film is not wrong.
I absolutely. I think the film is totally accurate.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
This is
okay,
funny.
ladies, it's the end of the world. It's our last night on Earth. What are you doing? Hopefully, it isn't. By the way, if you're watching this, unless this helps distract you,
Yay, distraction. Nothing like swallowing your feelings. What am I doing? I'm here. You know what I mean? I'm here at home with my family, because what else would you be doing, right?
I think the same. Like my ideal situation, if I had to be in that situation, would be that we would be with all of our family. I would love if it were like outside and we could have like a nice like outdoor gathering together in the summer. I don't think you get to choose when apocalypses happen, so maybe not outside if it happens in January, but
You'll
yeah.
have a good view of the meteorite on its way down, though. So
True, exactly.
let's be honest, we'd all be out there with our cell phones filming it like we were chronicling history. And we're gonna die in about 10 minutes.
yeah, you should live stream it.
In the
That's
film,
right.
watch the
Yeah.
live stream.
It's quicker.
You know what's funny though, talking about this, this is years ago, back in the Tumblr days, and there was this whole discussion on Tumblr about, you know, the criticism of people saying, oh, these young kids are so addicted to their phones and talking to people online. Like, well, if the world was ending, then like they wouldn't know what to do. Like, you know, and young people were kind of making the case, you know, they had some really fair points, which made sense. Like, depending on what your circumstances are, like, I think the three of us were very lucky that we our immediate families are close to us, like physically fairly close proximity. For some people that's not the case. They may not have anyone that's physically close to, like, in proximity, they may not have someone that's super physically close to them, and being able to be online and like talking about the scenario as it's happening with a friend or even just with someone else so that they don't feel alone, like that could be really helpful to some people depending on what your situation is. And then people started making it a whole scenario. It was like, okay, the world is ending, what are you saying to the other people on Tumblr, on Twitter, and things like that. And ultimately it was, at the end of it, you know, some people were cracking jokes, some people were saying really really beautiful and poignant messages, but at the end of the day it was all kind of people saying like, hey, you're not alone, I'm here too, which I thought was really nice.
Yeah, I would like to think that I am sitting around a dinner table discussing whether or not store-bought apple pie is better than homemade. I would probably be doing my best to distract my kids. That's probably what I would be doing. But I mean, yeah, I would be here. I would be here. Although, I mean, people do crazy things when they're under stress. People do crazy things. And I like the fact that the film showed that. The film showed that people just sort of went crazy. But that the best answer, the best place to be is at home. With people that love you, and that I thought that was a beautiful finale.
Yeah. Just being wherever brings you the most peace, you know. I think that's it's a beautiful ending, and I think ideally that's all that you could want for anyone, someone you care about or a stranger off the street. You just hope that if that time ever were to come, that everyone would be able to be somewhere that brings them peace and happiness.
Have either of you seen Melancholia?
Yes, I have. But I don't, you know, the funny thing is, I that was another movie that I watched really late at night. So I feel like I was maybe kind of drowsy, like not totally awake watching it, but I do remember bits and pieces of it.
It's this movie without any sense of humor whatsoever.
Lars von Trier makes sense, right?
Yeah. Well, ladies, it is not the end of the world, to my knowledge. But it is coming to the end of our podcast, so we should screen it or skip it. Don't Look Up, screen it or skip it.
I
I would
think it's well worth a watch. I loved it. I think the cast, the script, the performances, the messages. Um, I think that I'm a better person for it. And I know that might sound kind of weird talking about some satirical kind of comedy film, but I think that it was kind of a bit of a slap in the face. And I think that that's what it was meant to be. Um, a slap in the face, as in, like, wake up, look around you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, um, I think that, yeah, go into it knowing that it's a satire, uh, and I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised.
I basically said the exact same thing as Jules. I would screen it. I think that that's a really engaging film. I think, again, it's good to kind of have films that shake you a bit, that kind of force you to face something that's maybe a little inconvenient or a little uncomfortable. So and yet it's obviously delivered in a very sort of very spectacular, like fantastical, big budget, big cast kind of way. But yeah, it's completely engaging. It's very topical. So I would definitely screen it.
I will say that any film that opens with a quote from the great Jack Handy will get a screen it for me. That brought me such joy to see a Jack Handy quote. I was like, my gosh, that is so good. I miss those. What were they called? Deep Thoughts with Jack Handy on Saturday Night Live. No, it's a screen it. It's a screen it for me. I enjoyed it enough that I actually wished I'd seen it in a theater. I didn't expect that. That says a lot for me on a film that is available to me on Netflix. I'm not saying that everybody knows that I'm a big fan of the theater, but it was available to me on Netflix. It was, there, and I saw it and I went, man, I would have felt like I had justified my money from seeing this in the theater. Now, having said that, people watching it have to understand that satirical humor is very different than other comedy films. This isn't The Ballad of Ricky Bobby, or so it's not wild comedy. But I appreciate that, and I thought it was really well written, and I think that I can give it a screen it. I absolutely recommend it.
Yeah. I don't think it was a particularly obscure satire either. I think that it was probably, in terms of satirical films, pretty easy to digest.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes, I mean there was some broad comedy. Jonah Hill does broad comedy, and he had some moments in this, but I find that satirical humor is just a little bit of a different animal, and a lot of people can watch it and just go, it wasn't really funny, because it's not wild, but I thought it was great. I actually laughed out loud a bunch of times. And I thought it was the line, he's the guy that bought the Gutenberg Bible and lost it. Like, there's great lines like that. It's anyway, sorry, gonna go off on quotes, but it was good. It was good. Ladies, thank you. I love chatting with you. I appreciate your openness and your honesty with this conversation as well. I think it was a great conversation for us to have had. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me back. And yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Anytime. For you at home, a reminder, you can find us wherever podcasts are available. And if you go to the podcast page, and you can like and subscribe to us on YouTube if you're looking for another distraction. I know what this is. I know where I know what point of the film my little picture would have popped up on the screen. And also, if you go to the podcast page at screenfish.net, you can download Fishing for More, which are small group questions to help you get the conversation for people that you want to talk about the film with as well. Don't look up, but do look out for our next episode.
You have to add in, please.
funny.
So, ladies, I thank you again so much. I really appreciate it. And for you at home, we started the conversation. This was Screenfish.